Hi, good evening, all of you. My brother and sister here in Hong Kong. I am Hkcat,孔誥烽. First of all, I have to commend all of you for your great work and innovative work to hold this online rally so that you can continue the cause of defending Hong Kong autonomy and making the world know about the dire situation of Hong Kong despite the disruption brought by the coronavirus. As you know, the Hong Kong government never stopped cracking down on Hong Kong's freedom and the civil liberty of Hong Kong people, despite the fact that most of the Hong Kong people are now spontaneously and courageously fighting the disease on their own through cancellation of events and increasing awareness of personal hygiene and all these kind of grassroots efforts. But the government has been continuing to arrest protesters or suspected protesters from 2019, and it even arrested some of the most high-profile democratic politicians and owner of pro-democracy media who have a lot of friends in the international community and in the US. So this continuous crackdown on Hong Kong civil society is a slap in the face of the friends of Hong Kong people around the world, particularly in the US. It is the defiance of international attention and international solidarity supporting Hong Kong people on the part of the Hong Kong government. And it is very important that you guys make two demands regarding the first annual certification of Hong Kong autonomy by the U.S. State Department after the passing of the Hong Kong Human Rights and Democracy Act. First of all, the world really need to pay more attention to the issue of police brutality in Hong Kong. In the past, the international community pay most of their attention to whether the Beijing would mobilize the People's Liberation Army to cross the border and roll into Hong Kong and do some kind of a bloody massacre like what they did in Beijing in 1989. This possibility is still here, but now you see that Beijing has already shifted their strategy. They no longer need to mobilize the People's Liberation Army to crack down on Hong Kong civil society. They can have the Hong Kong police force to rely on to do this draconian and horrendous crime against human rights in Hong Kong. And of course, if in terms of formal structures, the Hong Kong police force is under the command of the chief executive of the Hong Kong government, but many people already observe that there's a lot of interaction between the Hong Kong police force higher up and the liaison office and the Chinese authority, and a lot of police officers nowadays need to spend a lot of time in the police academy in mainland China. As people who know about how the CCP operate would not be surprised if there is already party organization developing or having developed within the Hong Kong police force. So the Hong Kong police force, though nominally and formally under the command of the Hong Kong government, and many people would have the perception that the Hong Kong police force is actually under the command of the CCP. And as people know about the world history of genocide and crime against humanity would notice, many times the most horrifying violation of human rights done by autocratic regime is not done through formal armies, but done through some kind of a private army or militias under the command of the authoritarian government, but not in the formal structure of the government. And we can increasingly see that the Hong Kong police force is becoming a kind of a private army or militia controlled by Beijing. in comparison with the PLA. So this kind of force that is not directly or formally or nominally commanded by Beijing, but definitely influenced and used by Beijing, is the most dangerous force, because while Beijing gives them a free hand and rewarding them in one way or other to do the crackdown on Hong Kong civil society, if they go too much, if there's international scrutiny, Beijing can exonerate itself from the brutality of the police force. So actually that using this police force that is degenerating into a kind of a private army and militia, or even kind of thugs and ruffians at the disposal of Beijing, is more dangerous than the PLA nowadays. So the international community really should pay more attention to the issue of police brutality. So, and as you see, the Hong Kong government is already asking for massive increase in budget to increase the manpower and the military-grade hardware of the police force. So the Hong Kong government and the Beijing government definitely are ready to step up their strategy of using the Hong Kong police force to commit some of the most horrendous crime against Hong Kong human rights so far. And you see that Hong Kong's rule of law is no longer viable. In the British era, particularly in the last 20 years of British rule, the Hong Kong police force as a law enforcement body just arrests people, and once the suspects are arrested, the whole legal process started, and it is up to the criminal justice system to decide whether and how much the suspect or the convicted will be punished, and it's up to the criminal justice to punish and penalize the people who commit the crime. But nowadays you see that the police in the arrest process use a lot of torturing, use a lot of or even some more hideous crime allegedly that await serious investigation against the protester, arrest the protester. So the arrest process itself is a kind of a punishment or penalization enforced by the police. So it is a very unfortunate situation and very dangerous situation when you have this kind of a militia, private army-like force out of control of its formal and nominal authority commanding it. So it is poised to more escalation of crime against humanity. So putting this in the radar screen and demanding the U.S. State Department to start sanctioning some of the police officers and Chinese and Hong Kong government officials responsible for the police brutality is very important, and at least it can put a check on the police brutality and make some of the police officers, when they are committing some of the crime against human rights, have a second thought before they follow the order to do it. The second demand that you make is also very crucial because after the sovereignty handover for a long time, people in Hong Kong and in the international community somehow develop an illusion that if Beijing didn't fulfill the promise of giving Hong Kong genuine universal suffrage as promised in the Basic Law and in the British Sino Joint Declaration, at least the Hong Kong people can retain its pre-existing freedom of speech, freedom of assembly, and all kind of liberty inherited from the British era. But more than 20 years of Chinese rule show that it is just an unrealistic fantasy. We have a government not accountable to the people, don't need to face the voters, such as the Hong Kong SAR government. The lateral tendency of that government is to be more and more reckless, particularly so in the case of Hong Kong government, that it become only accountable to Beijing without leading to pay attention to the public opinion in Hong Kong and check and balance from anti-social forces in Hong Kong. So in this situation, the Hong Kong government really show it has low restraint in destroying many pre-existing freedom that Hong Kong people have been enjoying. So demanding the progress in realization of Hong Kong universal suffrage as one of the conditions for certifying Hong Kong's autonomy is very useful because it is not just about asking for some more right that we don't have right now in the form of universal suffrage and voting for the Hong Kong government, but it is also a very necessary and inevitable precondition for the preservation of the pre-existing right of Hong Kong and Hong Kong's autonomy. So the two demands that you guys are making are really important. The world should take a look. And thank you for all your works and fight on. And the world will never abandon Hong Kong. Thank you.